Hey everyone, how's it going? So what am I working on now? Well, if you notice, I've been out of the shop for a bit. Had to take some time off, had things going on, family oriented, so I had to take care of those, but I'm back. Anyway, so what am I working on now? Well, I have this Cadillac Escalade GMC Yukon, and customer's complaint was something's making an awful lot of noise underneath this thing. Well, it turns out Kirk and Rob had looked at it before while I was away, and it's the transfer case. Let me show you what's going on. So here is the transfer case, and an odd thing about this is that's a replacement transfer case. So I'm not sure what happened here, but if you look, you can see the seal in there is torn up. But check this out. So something ate up the bushing or whatever at the end of the in the tail shift of the transfer case. Now here's the problem. You hear all that movement? That movement's inside here. Somebody's already fixed a hole in this case right there. That's what that is. Somebody's fixed a hole. So what actually went wrong? Who knows? But they spoke to me about this, and I said, with a situation like that, with all that movement in there, I guarantee you it damaged something inside there. Just put a transfer case in it and be done with it. So that's what we're going to do today. We have a new yoke too. Now this yoke has a harmonic balancer basically built onto it. This is an aftermarket drive shaft. We got a new yoke, but I don't think the yoke comes with this balancer. It's basically for vibration and stuff like that. Is it really necessary? I don't know. I don't think so. See how it's got that rubber ring right there? It separates the outer part from the inner part. I've had on my own personal trucks where the outer parts come free from the inner part, and I've cut the outer part off, and I never noticed the difference. So I don't know what the actual point of it is, but who knows? So anyway, we're gonna do this job. You're gonna follow me along. All right, so now before we start, what I always do is I usually will mark a U-joint to the flange. And I will do both drive shafts, this one and this one. It's just something I've always done. Now, granted, the rear drive shaft looks like it's been replaced already at some point in time too. I don't know if that's a factory original. I can't tell. I'm not sure. It might be a factory original. But I always do that anyway, just to be on the safe side. So, all right, let's start unbolting. Basically, you're gonna take these out. I think they're 3/8, so let me go get a gun and get this ready. All right, first thing we're gonna do before we pull the drive shaft off, just because it's what I do anyways, I don't wanna break with tradition, I'm gonna pull the drain plug out. Now, I always tell you, pull the fill plug out first, but in all honesty, don't care at this point because the transfer case is destroyed. Okay, there is 0 fluid in this transfer case. So that right there tells you something. All right. Let's see about pulling the drive shaft off. See if my gun is strong enough. Depends on how tight somebody made these. Pretty tight. I always leave transmissions in neutral when I'm doing stuff on a lift. Let's get a pry bar and let's pop that out of the differential. All right. now, slide that end out. Now let's get a look at this drive shaft. And yeah, it's destroyed. The yoke is ruined. It's all galled up. You can see that. You're not polishing that up because it rides in a bushing. It'll destroy a bushing in a new transfer case. All right, do the same with the front one. All right, so same thing for this drive shaft. And I try to keep the straps separated front to rear, although they're probably the same on this. So same thing. Now I've seen some people in the past, they'll actually leave this shaft in place and pull the transfer case out and then just reinstall it onto the transfer case at the other end. To me, it's not worth the aggravation. All right, so now what we want to do is take this and stick it up like that, because now we have to separate this, and there's a vent that's just hanging out down here, and it's cool. So now we got to try to separate this. Let me see how am I going to do this? What's the most friendly way to do this? Get a little light in here. Is that going to help at all, or is that going to hurt? Yeah, it helps a little bit. All right. Now this rubber booty is just kind of a press fit. There it goes. And you want to make sure it's in place, and you want to make sure that you lube that shaft up a bit. And then you go back together, because moisture can get in there. All right, so now the transfer case, or the dry shaft, is going to just sit there. So what else is on this? Let's see. Let me shut this off. What else is on this? Let me take a look. Well, we got the bolts that hold this thing in here, and you can see right there above the tranny mount. So a lot of times it's easier to remove the tranny mount. I'm going to see if I can't work around it. I'm probably not going to be able to. So we're going to work. You know what? I'm not going to aggravate myself. I'm going to pull this cross member out. All right. So now let's pull this cross member out. There's two bolts up here, or two nuts rather, for the tranny mount. And then you have these bolts with nuts on the other end that are for the cross member. Sometimes you got to do it a little bit differently. Side. And this one I'm going to have to do from this side. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. And if you leave one bolt in on each side first, you should be able to get at least one of the other bolts out, because when it comes to taking the last two out, we're going to have a support or a jack or something underneath the cross member. Let's try this one. get it. Okay, didn't come down yet. Now I gotta get to that side. You can see what I'm doing, right? That side, yeah, okay. Where's my 21 slot? That thing's jammed in there because the weight came down. So let me get a support jack. Hang on one second. All right, so I have a support jack under here. Pick up on it slightly. So get these bolts. As you can see, this interferes with the exhaust right there. It's just a rubber bushing. Just got to deflect it enough. So now this will come down enough. Pop this end down. Support jack out of the way. Now this thing is not going to fall, and I'll show you that in a second. And yes, these cross members go in only one way, so if you don't remember which way it goes, or if you don't think you're going to remember which way it goes, mark it. Because you can put it in the opposite way, then you might have interference with the dry shaft in that. So, the transfer case comes in contact with this beam here. This is the cross member for the front torsion bars. Okay, so now we got to get all these bolts out. It's easier to take the transmission mount out, so let's do that. Let's pop that tranny mount out. Move it back here a little bit. Let me shine a little light on the subject. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, it helps a little bit. Yeah, maybe not. Alright, those are tight. Moving up to the big boy. That DeWalt 3/8 gun seen better days, but I like it because it will not over tighten the daylight side of things. All right, so now let's get those nuts off. I do not recall if they're 9/16ths or if they're 15s. They're 15s. The Chryslers are the 9/16ths. All right. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to leave this one in place. And I'm going to let the car down, or the truck down a little bit. And I'm going to get all the other ones out. So hopefully You can watch this. Move the pole jack a little bit. We still have the pole jack underneath. Let me let it down a little bit more. All right. So now this exhaust bracket on this side is like hecka in the way. Hopefully everything comes apart reasonably easy since this has already been obviously replaced once before. Drop the first one on the floor. And the problem too is getting to some of these because the transmission tunnel isn't super deep, so getting to some of them is a real pain. Oh, this one wasn't even that tight. All right, well, you get the idea. This is what I'm doing. So I got to do all of these. I forgot how many hold this in place. 6, 5, I don't quite recall. So I'm not going to bore you with all the details on doing that. So when I get back to the last one, then I'll start up again. All right, so I got all the bolts out, except for that bottom one there, or nuts, I should say. And as you can see, it started leaking out fluid. You're going to have transmission fluid in between the two. Yeah, so now this is a full-time all-wheel drive. It does not have any electronic pieces going to it other than a speed sensor that's up here that I still have to disconnect. But some of them have like an encoder motor, they call it, or a selector motor. This does not have any of that. So as far as electronics go, this one's reasonably simple. Disconnecting that one connector, putting it off to the side. I have a bucket underneath this thing because of course it started leaking. And it's not just going to fall out. And I'm going to have to get a transmission jack underneath there. Oh, the other thing too is I have a pole jack, that same pole jack, screw jack, support jack, whatever you want to call it. I have that underneath the transmission pan with a block of wood. And I went up slightly with it. All right. So we're going to let that come away a little bit, so this way the fluid in that can drip out. And while that's dripping out, I'm going to go get the transmission jack. Hopefully you can see all of that. Just picking up a little bit more on the transmission. I'm not sure. There you can see the support jack, block of wood. So it's separated, it's away. So like I said, let me go get a transmission jack and then I'm gonna have to put you off in the distance to watch me. All right, so I got the training jack in place. And now when I go back in, unfortunately I might not be able to film that. This isn't going to be too pretty. Not as strong as I used to be. No. Actually, let me do it this way. Not as strong as I used to be. That's for certain. The last thing I want to do is get hurt. So now, all right, you get the general idea. Now me pulling this out, I don't even know how you're gonna be able to watch me. Go from over here maybe? Is that gonna work for you? Let's try this. Like I said, don't judge. This ain't gonna be pretty. All right. All right, so there we go. What I'm going to probably do is I'm going to get Kirk or somebody to help me get this off of here. Sorry about the compressor. Get this off here, get the new one into that position. All right, so that should be good for now. You get the general idea of what I did to that point. All right, let's stop this here. All right, so the only thing I see that I'm going to have to change over is the speed sensor there. Take a good look at your mounting surface too. I'm going to have to clean that up. You can see the swirl marks on it from somebody using a cookie to clean it. Here's the replacement. Like I said, the only thing I see is that speed sensor. I wonder, did somebody forget to put fluid in that one? I don't know. All right, let me get these switched over on the jack. All right, transferring the speed sensor is relatively easy. It just unscrews. And it wasn't even super tight. Okay, well, we're going to need a speed sensor. See that? It's hammered. Okay, let's get a speed sensor for this thing. All right, so the new transfer case is there. Put your gasket on. Be careful while you're putting it on so you don't tear it. And also be careful when you're putting this thing up in place so you don't hit the gasket on anything while you're going up in place. So I already cleaned the gasket surface up top. I didn't show you that. Just plain and simple cleaning. Make sure the gasket's tucked where it needs to be. And it's sitting flush. These gaskets go on in one position, so sometimes you got to trial fit them. You may even have to flip the gasket. So, okay, let's get this thing up in place. Let me see how your view is. I'll get you up a little more. All right, let's see if that works out for you. And obviously, be careful when you're doing this. So the last thing I want to do is drop this thing on the ground. Once I get it up over the cross member here, I'll feel better. I'm always a bit leery about it. Now comes the fun part. Trying to get it up in place. And that's as high up as the tranny jack goes. So I can't really show you yet, but I'm going to show you in a second. If I can get to that point. I'm not gonna be able to film this really because it's too much of a pain. But I'm gonna try to get the snout of the transfer case on the output of the transmission right there. Once I can get that in place, then it should go. So, but it's just a matter of manipulating everything. I gotta get something to clean the floor real quick, hold on. All right, let me see if I can do this in one shot. It's not as easy as it looks, at least not for me. Like I said, I'm not as strong as I used to be. There it goes. Okay. So see that? Now it's in place. Compressor just went off again. I need a compressor, but just went off again. So basically it's going to be, I know you don't want to hear this, reverse procedure to install, but I can't really show you me putting those bolts and stuff on. It's all kind of by feel, or nuts. I keep saying bolts. Let me get those caught. Okay, so all the nuts are tight. I hooked up the vent line up there. Now, one thing, I have the pole jack still underneath here, block of wood. Put the transmission up as high as it'll go for when you're putting the drive shaft, the front drive shaft back in. It will give you a little more room, because as you put the transmission up, this point gets further away from the front differential. So if you have it down low, sometimes it's very difficult. Let's see. Because you're limited on your room. So I lubed this up with some silicone lube that I have. There it goes. So now that that's caught, now I can actually let this screw jack down for now. I'm going to need it again for when we put that cross member in, but we don't need it right this second. And I still have to put that speed sensor in, because the speed sensor, as you saw, was all boogered up. All right, I may actually have to go, well, let's see. I might have to go back up on the transmission assembly there a little bit to get the front of the drive shaft caught, but we'll see. Can you see that all right? Let's see. Okay, so now what centers this in place, you have to have that centered. Turn this light on. This thing has clips on the inside that will go to the inside edge here. Sometimes they don't have it. They'll have like a little nub on the end of the yoke here that goes over just the edge. So just be mindful of how yours centers. And I try to put it back. See the witness mark right there? Witness mark right there. I try to put it back in the same orientation it was in before. Let's see. Come on. All right. Strap bolts in place. And let's make sure our mark is lined up with those. Now this gun does not make things super tight. So for those of you saying, oh, you zapped it down, it's really not that tight, trust me. I'm gonna put a wrench on it. When I'm done, so that's a 7/16. Let me go grab a wrench real quick. Now all I'm doing is I'm jamming the U-joint with the pry bar. Just to keep it from turning, that's all. Okay, that one's good. It's tight. You don't have to go crazy. All right, so now we're going to move forward or rearward. Let's put that tranny mount in place. Now that 3/8 gun works great if you're just using a straight up socket. If you use a swivel socket, it loses a lot of its torque. Gun has lasted me a long time. It's seen better days, but whatever, it still works. Extension of socket. That's good. I'm happy with that. All right, so now let's put that speed sensor in before I go any further, because if I go any further, I'm going to have this thing hanging down. Speed sensor goes up top there. You're not going to be able to see this, but it goes in that hole right there. So let me get that in place. Maybe you can see some of this, I don't know. Let me see what you can see. I don't know. And it's plastic, you don't have to go bananas tightening it. Just make sure it's snug. Okay. So I am good with that. Not quite sure where these vent hose was supposed to go. Why it's even here. That's from the transmission. Not quite sure where it's supposed to end up. Might zip tie that off to the side. I don't know yet. Let's see. All right. So next thing. I should have done this before, but I didn't. Let me shut this one off. Is get that collar to seat down. There it goes. That's all. No big deal. All right, let's get the cross member in. I can shut this light off. Let's get this cross member in. And like I said, just remember, this thing can go in either way, but it's meant to go in only one way. And this side has a hump in it, a reverse hump, so that goes to this side. Now what I'll usually do is I'll catch, oops, hold on. The zigged when I should have zagged. I will catch the mount bolts, nuts. I don't know why I keep calling everything bolts, but I do. Now don't tighten those up yet. Wait until you're set in place. Now, you screw up with the pull jack until you get the bolt hole lined up. Oh, look at this one. We're going to do that. We're going to catch that one bolt because then it'll act like a seesaw or a pivot for the rest of them. Anything's a hammer if you try hard enough. Alright, so now with that in place, I can actually move the pull jack to the side here. You can see what I'm doing. Can you? Yes, you can. Binding up a little bit. Sometimes you gotta shock things with a hammer. Mallet. As you can see, I'm bottoming out here, so I gotta reposition the pole jack. All right. Not liking that too much. It's not liking that. Hold on. A lot of times it would thread itself in. That's why the tip of the bolt is actually tapered. Maybe just like that. And then we have the last one on this side, which you could put these things in backwards too if you wanted to, but I think if I put this one in backwards, it'll hit that mount, and I don't want to hit that mount for the exhaust. Going in. All right. So now we can take the pole jack out. We don't need this anymore. Let's get this out of the way. So if you got a car up on a lift, you don't want to forget about a pole jack. That'll make for a really, really, really bad day. tight enough. That's all that. So now that's all good. So just look over your work, just make sure everything's all right. So now the next thing we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to fix that drive shaft. All right, so I was gonna show you changing that yoke. Here was the GM part that we got. Here's the yoke they sent us. No, size matters. Hopefully I can get one soon because I know this customer is itching for this vehicle. Let's see what happens. All right, so the yoke's not gonna be here for several hours, so I figured what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this thing apart for right now and go from there. Don't ever reuse a yoke like this. You're asking for trouble if you do. It'll destroy a new transfer case because, like I said, it's all galled up. See that? Don't ever reuse that. You can't, don't even polish it. It won't be any good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this U-joint apart. Let me set you up here. See what I'm gonna do. All right. Now on this has the inboard retaining clips. Let me see if I can get you straight. And you see whoever put this thing together, never put a grease fitting in this U-joint. So we're going to be replacing the U-joint. These clips that sit in here, see that? You got to knock those out. And usually when you hit them, you can get them to rise up to a point where you can actually get the screwdriver in there to release the clips. Just be careful, because these things can go flying, take your eye out. Actually, let me grab that with a pair of needle nose because I got to articulate it a little bit. Hang on. All right, so let's try to dig this out of here. And it is stuck in there. There we go. Take that out, just put it off to the side. And I'm going to dig this other one out on this side. Same thing, you just put a screwdriver on it. I usually hit the screwdriver with the palm of my hand. Oops, there, and that one went flying. All right, so now this tool that I'm using here, this tool is actually a ball joint press tool. This is a snap-on. You don't need anything this spectacular for at-home use. I had an OTC one at one point that I used to use at home, and that thing worked perfectly well too. I just needed a very good ball joint press, so I picked this one up, and it has totally met and exceeded my expectations, but it is an insane amount of money. I won't even get into that, how much this thing cost me. But at the time, well worth it, and I made a lot of money with it. So anyway, back onto this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna press this out. And like I said, we're only gonna do the one side. So let me set you up here. Let me center you better in my camera. And let me go get a socket that'll fit the end of that. And then we'll do this. All right. So now hopefully this goes smoothly. I usually like to walk this in by hand. You try to do this with a gun and then you overshoot it and everything else. And you just create more problems for yourself. Some people would do this with a hammer. I don't like doing it with a hammer. Actually blew the joint out of its end. It blew the end of the joint off. That's okay. Well, we got a new one. So a lot of times, you can take the cap off, and then you can manipulate this up and over to get this one out. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it won't go. Sometimes you actually got to press that cup back through. Now for this, I'm going to press it back through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, I don't have a real hammer, I've got a plastic hammer here. I can't set that cup in place. Then I'm going to reverse it. I know this seems a little bulky, hokey, whatever. Okay, so now this end is out. And then you just take it off like that. Anytime I've had to press U-joints, I usually will replace them if I have to press them more than once, only because I'm afraid of destroying them. So, all right, so that's going to sit there, and we're going to wait for the new one to show up. In the meantime, you can look at this, just make sure that everything looks good. You can clean out the spots where the U-joint fits through, and everything should be good. All right. All right, so the yoke's on me. There's the correct one. So let's get this installed. Usually what I'll do is I will put the joint into this first, get that set, and then put this thing together. I just find it a little bit easier on my end to do that. So what I will usually do is take the U-joint completely apart, and be careful when you do so, because inside there, see those? Those are all little needle bearings. Now because this hasn't been used, you could put these in any position on there. If it was used, then I would worry about what position it was in, because these things can create grooves and stuff inside there. So now, what I will usually do, hopefully I can film this, I will usually set this in like this, and then I will set a cap on like that and bottom it out on the actual U-joint. Then what I will do is I will take a brass hammer while holding pressure on this, start to set that cap in place. Now usually what I'll do too is drive it in a little further than you need to. The reason for that is when you put the cap in on the other side, because of where the needles sit, as you put the cap in, you want to move the actual U-joint over slightly. So this way it's catching some of those needles, because as you're hitting it, you could jar it, and those needles could fall. And if they fall, they will jam in place. And that's a whole nother cluster thingy. You know the word I'm going to use, but I won't use it. Okay, so now what I have to do is I'm going to put this clip in first. Let me set this down right here for right now. Ouch. With the U-joint, they give you a little goodie bag. There is a Zerk fitting there. Oops, Zerk fitting right there, and the clips. I usually just rip this thing open, pour it into my hand. This way I have everything, just like so. Down on the bench. One clip. See if you can see that. Okay. I'll just take it and Try to snap it down. Unfortunately, I might cover this while I'm doing this. There. So now it's snapped down in place. Now what I'll do is for this side, I'm actually going to stick it in the tool, and then I'm going to center it that way. And then a lot of times too, I'll actually do this part by hand. Actually, let me go this way. It's easier to see. All right, let me get what I need so I can do that by hand. Hang on a second. All right. So now I'm going to press that in. This clip is going to bottom out. So now I should be able to put the clip in here. You take the clip and you can feel if it's going into the groove. If it's not going into the groove, oh, you can take a hammer too and tap it, but you see how it's sprung back? If it doesn't go into the groove, but in this one's already bottomed out, what you might have to do is take a hammer and a drift and hit the edge of this way a little bit and shock it, because it'll move a hair. Because sometimes these points will actually drift in like this, so it's not a straight true 90 degree. It'll actually drift in. So, all right, so that's that. Knock that over. All right, so now the same thing with the drive shaft. I'm going to have you out of my way a little bit while I try to do this. But I'm going to basically do the same thing, but it's on this end. I already wiped these out. So now, basically the same thing as I did before. And like I said, this way you're holding pressure on it, but this way you actually get those needle bearings riding on that point of the joint. Point of the joint. Now this one is going to be a little more difficult to catch the clips because you got this in the way, but it's really not a terrible ordeal. So get that in a little bit more. I like to have them in further if I can, because in this way it pushes it out more, because as you can see, the end of the joint is actually sticking through on this side, just a hair. So now, catch this cup on this side. Okay, so that's in. So now we're going to catch the first clip on here. Okay. And now we got to put it in the tool. So I'm on my roll cart over, because my roll cart was holding this before. Knocking stuff over, knocking stuff over. Hang on a second, I'll reposition. Oh, is he? All right, cool. All right, hang on a guy. All right, so this is a little difficult to see now because the yoke is in the way, but I'm going to tighten up on this end to move this joint over. Now, one thing I've seen people do in the past too, and you got to be mindful of, what the heck was I just going to say? I don't know what I was going to say. I was going to say something, but whatever. Like I said also before, just make sure that these things are sitting true because they can fold in. You may have to drive it out. I've seen it before where you have to put a punch in from this side to drive that out. Oh, that's what I was going to say. See how there's a ledge right here? See that ledge? I've seen it to where people will put the clip in place and have this thing sticking out too far, and then the clip is actually underhanging that ledge, and then they go and try to put it in place, like drive this thing over, drive this over like I just did, and then what happens is it'll catch that edge, and you can either break the cap or you break the clip. So now I'm just making sure the clip is fitting in the groove, and it is. It's a little tight, but that's fine. Okay, so that's in place. All right. So now that comes out. Now, how difficult was that? Really, it wasn't that difficult. Now, one thing I do want to show you, let me back this up a little bit. Actually, hold on a second. I'll back you up to like here. A lot of times when you're done with a joint, you'll notice like sometimes it won't flex one way and it will the other. When you're done, shock it. And now it free floats. Because what happens is the shocking with the hammer will jar it and make it move. All right, so let me put this cap in here. Now, these things are pre-greased, and as you can see, it has grease. It's fully greased, so I am not going to add any more grease to it. Because another thing you got to remember too is, if you're not using the same kind of grease as what they used, the similar greases, they will actually melt. Okay, so that's all good. Let's install said shaft. I was recording, right? Yeah. All right, so let's get the dry shaft in place. Okay, so now it can hang just a little bit, and we're going to put this end in place. And you see my little handy dandy paint mark on there. Now a lot of times too, what I'll do, depending on how loose fitting the caps are, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll wrap the end of it with tape. This way it keeps the caps from falling off. Because you wind up losing a cap and then all those needle bearings go flying all over the place. There they go. Sorry about the delay there. All right. Each cap goes on. Tools. This thing, there is a ton of cook on this. Hold on a second. I'm going to actually wire wheel these bolts really quick. Hang on. All right, I wire wheeled the bolts. They go in a little bit rough. Figure at least clean them up a little bit. Tell you what, this new transfer case is tight. Okay. Like I said, that gun is not super strong. Served me well. Be mindful if you're doing this to turn that over, you know, rotate a drive shaft, that you could catch the pry bar inside the U-joint because it articulates slightly. So, okay, so that's that. So now let's add fluid to this thing. All right, so here we go. We're going to use this to fill it up. This is GM automatic transmission and, manual transmission and transfer case fluid. This is the correct fluid for this transfer case. Supposedly it's right from GM. Okay, so let me get you in position here where you can actually see me. I'm sorry about that reverse siren that you're hearing over there, that chiming. We have a truck making a delivery next door, and the truck driver apparently doesn't know how to back up. I'm not quite sure. I have a bucket on the floor too to help catch any mess. That's one. Let me go fill this up again. Hold on a second. Some dripped on the floor here from the tool. All right, let me, as you see there, let me fill this up again. Actually, I'm going to back you up too, so you get a better view of everything. But I think that's as far out as I can go. All right, hang on a second. All right, so we're full again. And basically, you're just going to fill it up until it comes out. And it should be enough. And there it is. It's coming out. So it was about 2 quarts. As you can see, I still have that. It was a total of 3 quarts that I put into this thing in both shots there. So, all right. Sorry about that. Make sure that was all set up. So now let's put the fill plug in. tighten these things down until they bottom out. Not necessary. Tapered fit. There we go. That's tight enough. Felt it getting snug. Wipe off any excess. Don't leave a mess. And that's pretty much it. You can see how far that's sticking out. And it's still good. I can go tighter. And that's the other one. I did double check that. Always double check plugs and stuff like that. All right. So let's go on a road test. All right, so far so good on this road test. I mean, everything sounds good. I don't know if you hear that noise. That's in the dashboard. I don't know. I have no idea what that is. Could be the blower motor. I haven't the slightest idea. But, so yeah, let me get back to the shop because that's irritating. And actually, yes, it is the blower motor because I turned the speed up and it kind of comes and goes now. So, but yeah, doing figure eights in a parking lot in my secret testing facility in Mexico. Everything is good. So yeah, let me get back to the shop and finish this up. Man, that's irritating. All right, so all's good. Back at the shop. Customer can come pick it up. They were hoping to have it today at lunch, but obviously we had that issue with the wrong yoke. So anyway, but yeah, okay. Hopefully you got something out of that. If you did, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching.